The small coastal village of Coahersivven in County Kerry holds a secret that most visitors will never hear about. On certain nights, when the fog rolls in thick from the Atlantic, locals will tell you to stay off the roads. Not because of treacherous driving conditions, but because of something far stranger. They'll speak in hushed tones about the figures that appear in the mist, tall and impossibly slender, standing perfectly still on the white lines as if waiting for something. These aren't ghost stories passed down through generations. These are accounts from the last few decades, documented by police, witnessed by ordinary people, and investigated by authorities who found evidence they couldn't explain. Tonight, we're going deep into Ireland's most disturbing pattern of contact, a phenomenon that connects remote bogs to military airbases, fishing boats to motorways, and suggests something has been quietly observing the Emerald Isle for far longer than anyone wants to admit. What you're about to hear isn't a collection of random strange lights in the sky. This is an examination of a systematic pattern of encounters that share disturbing similarities, encounters that left physical evidence, affected multiple witnesses simultaneously, and were documented by institutions with no interest in sensationalism. We're going to explore why these incidents cluster in specific regions, what the physical traces tell us about the nature of these visitations, and, most unsettling of all, what the behavior patterns suggest about the intent behind these encounters. By the end of this investigation, you'll understand why Ireland's UFO cases are among the most credible in the world, and why the Irish government has quietly maintained files on these incidents for over half a century. Let's begin with what makes the Irish encounters unique. Unlike the dramatic mass sightings that make international headlines, the Irish phenomenon operates differently. It's intimate, localized, and deeply invasive. These aren't distant lights performing aerial maneuvers. These are close-range encounters where witnesses find themselves face-to-face with entities that seem to be studying them with clinical precision. The encounters follow a pattern that repeats across decades and geography, suggesting not random visits, but deliberate operations conducted with careful methodology. Consider the essential elements that appear again and again in Irish cases. First, there's the electromagnetic interference. Vehicles stall without mechanical cause. Radios crackle and fail. Electrical systems dim or surge. This isn't occasional. It's consistent across encounters separated by years and hundreds of kilometers. Second, there's the missing time. Witnesses experience temporal discontinuities where minutes or even hours vanish from their memory, leaving only fragments and a disturbing sense that something happened during those lost moments. Third, there's the physical evidence. Circular depressions in soil, vegetation bent but not broken, elevated ground temperatures, scorched earth in geometric patterns. These traces appear repeatedly, examined by police and documented in official reports. But perhaps most disturbing is the behavior of the entities themselves. When witnesses describe these figures, whether glimpsed near a roadside or observed from a fishing boat, they use remarkably similar language. The movements are described as wrong, as if gravity affects them differently. Their proportions are consistently off, limbs too long, heads too large, postures that no human would naturally assume. And their eyes, when visible, reflect light in ways that don't match any known biology. These aren't vague shadows or distant silhouettes. These are detailed observations made at close range by credible witnesses who had no prior interest in the paranormal. The Coahersivven Roadside Figure case from 1998 exemplifies how these encounters unfold. Michael O'Shea and Claire Daly were driving home late one April night along the Ring of Kerry, a route they'd traveled countless times. The fog that night was thick, but not unusual for the region. What was unusual was the figure standing motionless on the white line in the center of the road, illuminated fully by their headlights. The immediate strangeness wasn't just the figure's presence, but its proportions. Both witnesses independently described limbs that were slightly too long, a posture that suggested no weight, and most unnervingly, a head that tilted at an angle that seemed anatomically impossible. When their car came to a stop just meters away, the figure didn't react to the screeching brakes or the bright lights. It continued observing something on the ground, until, with deliberate slowness, it turned its head toward them. Claire later said this motion reminded her of a dog hearing a distant sound, except the rotation was too smooth, too far, defying the normal range of human neck movement. The face, obscured by fog and distance, appeared to lack clear features. No obvious eyes, no visible mouth, just the faint impression of a narrow shape where a face should be. Then came the technical failures. The engine cut out completely. The headlights dimmed to a faint flicker. The dashboard went dark as if the battery had been instantly drained. In the silence that followed, both witnesses heard the same sound, a soft clicking, rhythmic and deliberate, like stones tapping together somewhere just outside the car. This auditory element appears in multiple Irish encounters, a detail witnesses often hesitate to mention because it seems so bizarre, yet it recurs with enough frequency to suggest significance. What happened next is where the encounter enters truly unsettling territory. Both Michael and Claire remember staring at the figure. Their next clear memory is the engine running again, the interior lights functioning normally, and the figure gone. When Michael checked the dashboard clock, 23 minutes had passed. Not the few seconds or couple of minutes they remembered, but nearly half an hour. Neither could account for that missing time. There was no memory of the figure leaving, no recollection of turning the key to restart the engine, just a discontinuity in their experience that left them deeply shaken. The Garda took their reports seriously enough to investigate the location within hours. Sergeant Timothy Moore found no footprints in the wet verge, no evidence of anyone having stood on the road, and nothing to suggest vehicle malfunction beyond the witness's account. What he did note in his official report was mild electromagnetic interference on his radio near the spot where the couple had stopped. This detail, seemingly minor, connects to a broader pattern observed in UFO encounters worldwide. The presence of these craft or entities seems to generate electromagnetic fields strong enough to disrupt electronic equipment, but subtle enough to leave no permanent damage. The couple's subsequent experiences add another layer to the phenomenon. Both reported headaches and sleep disturbances in the week following the encounter. These symptoms, mild and transient, are nonetheless consistent with exposure to unusual electromagnetic fields or possibly even low-level radiation. Claire felt compelled to document everything in writing immediately, as if some instinct warned her that memories might fade or distort. When researchers interviewed them separately 5 years later, their accounts remained consistent in every major detail. The tall, pale figure, the elongated limbs, the unnatural head tilt, the engine failure, the clicking sound, and the missing 23 minutes. This consistency over time, without embellishment or elaboration, is a hallmark of genuine testimony. Now let's shift our attention to the maritime encounters, because Ireland's position on the Atlantic seaboard means the phenomenon isn't confined to land. The Donegal Coast Spheres incident from 2009 reveals how these visitations extend into the marine environment. On a clear winter night, 3 independent witnesses, lighthouse keeper Thomas Riley and fishermen Patrick and Daniel McClure, simultaneously observed luminous spheres emerging from and descending into the Atlantic Ocean. What makes this case extraordinary isn't just the multiple witnesses, but the corroboration across different observation points and the technical documentation that survived. Riley was conducting his routine lighthouse duties when he first noticed a circular reflection on the water's surface. Unlike normal reflections, this one held steady, suspended above the waves. Meanwhile, the McClure brothers, working their lobster pots offshore, saw the same light and brought their boat to idle. They described the sphere as perfectly round, white with a soft halo, glowing with steady intensity about a meter above the Atlantic. Then it did something that defies conventional explanation. The sphere descended beneath the surface without creating a splash, ripple, or spray. It entered the water as if passing through air, not liquid. Within minutes, additional spheres appeared. One rose from beneath the surface, glowing pale blue. Another emerged, illuminated in yellowish white.
Eventually, 4 spheres hovered together in a loose diamond formation. The Atlantic around them remained strangely calm, the water not reflecting their light in normal ways, but instead showing a diffused sheen, as if the physical properties of the ocean had changed in their presence. The spheres moved with clear coordination, adjusting positions relative to each other with precision that suggested communication or unified control. From his lighthouse vantage point, Riley attempted to track them on radar. Nothing registered. The spheres were invisible to his instruments despite being clearly visible to the naked eye. This selective visibility, physical to human perception but undetectable to radar, is a recurring characteristic in UFO encounters. It suggests technology that can manipulate electromagnetic radiation in ways our current physics can't fully explain. When the fishermen tried to contact the lighthouse via marine VHF, their transmissions were interrupted by severe static. This interference cleared instantly when the spheres departed, another indicator of the electromagnetic effects these objects produce. The synchronized departure was perhaps the most impressive aspect of the encounter. All 4 spheres rose together, maintaining their formation, then accelerated sharply at an angle that seemed to defy inertia. They climbed into the cloud layer and disappeared. The moment they vanished, radio communications normalized, the sea returned to familiar patterns, and the air felt normal again. Daniel McClure described the transition as immediate, like a switch being turned off. Both brothers independently wrote detailed accounts that night, sealed them in envelopes, and only opened them 2 months later in the presence of a researcher. The descriptions matched perfectly. Riley's official report to the Irish Coast Guard documented everything: the time of each sighting, colors and number of objects, approximate positions, radar inactivity, radio interference, and the synchronized ascent. Weeks later, a brief reference surfaced in RAF Boehmer's radar archives across the water in England. They had detected an anomalous cluster above the Irish coast for less than 2 seconds at an altitude inconsistent with any aircraft. The signal was tagged as non-threatening and archived. This cross-border radar detection provides independent technical corroboration of something unusual in Irish airspace that night.
What's significant about the Donegal spheres isn't just that multiple witnesses saw them, but that the objects demonstrated behaviors that serve no obvious human purpose. They didn't travel from point A to point B like conventional aircraft. They emerged from the ocean, hovered, coordinated with each other, and departed vertically at impossible speeds. This suggests either a technology far beyond current human capabilities or something that operates according to principles we don't yet understand. The fact that they interacted with the ocean environment, entering and exiting water without disturbance, implies mastery over physical laws governing fluid dynamics and surface tension. Now we need to examine the military encounters, because when these phenomena interact with defense installations, the documentation becomes even more robust. The Gormanston Air Base descent from 1976 is one of Ireland's most credible cases precisely because it involved trained military observers, occurred on a secure facility, and was documented in official records. On the evening of October 22nd, Sergeant Brian O'Day was in the control tower when his radar detected a pin-sharp pulse right in the center of the screen. The blip appeared at an altitude where no aircraft should hover and vanished almost instantly. Simultaneously on the ground, Corporal Liam Fitzpatrick and 2 trainees were conducting a routine perimeter patrol when something fundamental changed in their environment. The sound disappeared. Not gradually, but suddenly, as if someone had pressed a mute button on the world. The low rustle of wind through grass ceased. The distant hum of traffic faded. Even the insects went silent. This sonic vacuum lasted only moments, but was profound enough that all 3 men noticed it independently. Then, above the tree line, a pale, warm glow began to brighten. It rose slowly, gathering definition until it became a distinct luminous object hovering roughly 60 feet above the ground. The object made no sound.
This detail is crucial because Gormanston's location meant any aircraft, even small ones, could be heard from miles away. Yet this craft, clearly visible and hovering at low altitude, produced no engine noise, no rotor wash, no vibration in the air. O'Day watched through binoculars from the tower and confirmed the absence of aviation lights or any conventional aircraft features. The object then began a controlled vertical descent, coming down in a perfectly straight line with no wobble or drift. It moved with the precision of an elevator, not the variable descent of anything using aerodynamic lift. As it lowered behind Hangar 2, the glow illuminated the metal siding with a faint warm reflection. The three men on patrol moved closer, stopping at the corner of the hangar to observe. That's when they saw the figures. Two shapes moving along the perimeter fence, slender and upright, walking with steady, deliberate steps. Their height was difficult to judge in the darkness, but estimates put them at over 6 feet tall, with proportions that seemed elongated. Most unsettling, the figures appeared to be inspecting the fence line, pausing at posts, examining the boundary as if conducting some kind of survey. The figures didn't react to the presence of the patrol. They continued their methodical inspection until they moved into deeper shadow and were lost from view. When Fitzpatrick and his team rounded the hangar to examine where the craft had descended, they found nothing. No debris, no scorch marks, no impressions in the gravel, no heat signature on the metal. The area was completely undisturbed, as if nothing had landed there at all. Yet all four witnesses, the three-man patrol and O'Day in the tower, had observed the same sequence of events from different angles. Back in the control tower, O'Day's radar detected another brief blip high above the base at the exact moment the figures disappeared from view. This timing correlation between the ground-level activity and the aerial signal suggests a connection, perhaps the figures being retrieved or the craft's departure. The following morning, an Air Corps officer reviewed the reports. The lack of physical evidence limited the investigation's scope, but the event was officially logged as unusual light over airfield with possible unauthorized activity. The incident circulated quietly among personnel who served at Gormanston in the 70s, and those present that night maintained consistency in their accounts over decades. What makes the Gormanston case particularly significant is the location. This wasn't a random field or isolated road. This was a military installation with trained observers, security protocols, and documentation procedures. The fact that something could descend onto an Air Corps base, conduct what appeared to be a reconnaissance operation, and depart without being intercepted raises profound questions about the nature of Irish airspace sovereignty. If these objects can operate with impunity over military facilities, what does that suggest about their capabilities and intentions? We need to discuss the physical traces these encounters leave behind, because this evidence transforms subjective sightings into objective phenomena. The Lochgar campfire incident from 1984 provides one of the clearest examples of ground traces associated with entity encounters. Four friends were camping near the lake when their campfire's flames suddenly dipped, not from wind, but as if heat was being drawn away. The air pressure changed, becoming heavier, and a white glow appeared over the water. The object that emerged was smooth and curved, hovering silently about 20 meters offshore, moving with deliberate control. What happened next combined the aerial phenomenon with direct entity contact. As the glowing craft maneuvered above the lake, a tall, thin figure appeared near the tree line, standing apart from shadows, facing the camper's direction. The figure's proportions were wrong. Arms too long, shoulders tapering sharply, head narrow. It didn't stand the way humans stand, shifting weight unconsciously. It was perfectly still, as if weight was irrelevant. Then it moved, not walking, but gliding, sliding across uneven ground as if floating an inch above the soil. The object above the lake responded to the figure's presence, rotating and adjusting position as if the two were communicating. When the figure stepped backward into the foliage and vanished, the aerial craft ascended rapidly, shooting upward with smooth acceleration until it disappeared into the night sky. The lake's surface, which had appeared pale beneath the craft's glow, instantly returned to normal darkness. The next morning, one of the campers found a triangular burn mark pressed into the ground near the water's edge. The shape was clean and sharp, approximately a meter across, with soil inside that was darker and more brittle than surrounding earth. This triangular impression is significant because it matches patterns reported in other Irish cases and internationally. The shape suggests a landing configuration, perhaps 3 contact points arranged in geometric precision. The fact that the soil was altered, darkened, and made brittle indicates exposure to intense heat or energy, yet there was no charring or combustion. This is consistent with exposure to focused electromagnetic radiation or possibly microwave energy. The mark remained visible for several days before weather eroded its edges. Photographs taken by the witnesses and shown to local historians revealed similarities to older accounts from the 50s and 60s when similar triangular impressions appeared after light sightings near Loch Gur. The pattern we're seeing across these cases points to something methodical. These aren't random appearances. The objects and entities demonstrate purposeful behavior, surveying landscapes, inspecting infrastructure, observing human activity, and leaving evidence of their presence. The electromagnetic effects suggest technology that generates powerful fields as a byproduct of propulsion or operation. The missing time episodes indicate either temporal manipulation or memory suppression, both possibilities that challenge our understanding of consciousness and physics. The physical traces prove these encounters have measurable impact on the material world, ruling out mass hallucination or purely psychological phenomena. Now let's examine the motorway encounters, because these represent some of the most disturbing cases. When these phenomena interact with moving vehicles at high speeds, the implications for safety and the vulnerability of witnesses become acute. The Westmeath motorway stalker from 2013 exemplifies this category. Ian Walsh, a delivery driver familiar with late-night routes, was traveling east on the M6 after midnight when he noticed a shimmer in his side mirror. At first, he assumed it was a reflection from the barrier or a road sign, but the shimmer moved with fluid deliberation, gliding rather than flickering. What Ian observed next violated the normal rules of highway travel. The shimmer wasn't behind him, it was beside him, just outside the reach of his headlights, moving along the hard shoulder and matching his speed exactly at 120 kilometers per hour. The movement held a perfect horizontal line, not bouncing with terrain or varying with the van's minor adjustments. It was locked to his position, as if tethered by invisible measurement. When he slowed, it slowed. When he accelerated, it matched him instantly. This wasn't random, it was tracking. When the object moved into direct view beside his van, Ian saw its true form. It was metallic and smooth, oval or slightly saucer-like, with no visible seams or openings. A subtle glow radiated from underneath, creating a pale pool of light as if it floated on its own halo. The object maintained precise formation at mirror height, neither advancing nor retreating, locked to the van with geometric precision. Inside the cabin, electrical disturbances began. Dashboard lights flickered and dimmed. The radio crackled despite being switched off. The phone charger blinked. Ian felt static prickling his forearms. Then came the moment that transformed this from an observation into a contact event. Through the metallic surface of the object, Ian glimpsed a dark silhouette, as if an interior outline became briefly visible through the outer shell. The shape was still, positioned somewhere within the craft, and the image lasted only a second before the surface regained its reflective sheen. This brief transparency suggests either a momentary failure in whatever cloaking or reflective mechanism the craft employs, or possibly a deliberate revelation, allowing the witness to see what was inside. The object then moved ahead of Ian's van, positioning itself several meters in front and slightly above ground level. At precisely that moment, His tachograph recorded something impossible. For 3 seconds, the device registered a spike in speed, the van appearing to jump forward on paper, even though Ian felt no acceleration. The engine didn't strain, the road didn't blur, yet the tachograph captured motion that didn't physically occur. At that exact instant, the object surged forward with smooth acceleration, shooting up the motorway before rising at a shallow angle and vanishing into darkness. When Ian checked the time, 8 minutes had passed, but he remembered only the few seconds of acceleration and disappearance. This missing time, combined with the tachograph anomaly, suggests something profoundly disturbing. Either time itself was manipulated in a localized fashion, or Ian's perception of time was altered, or both. The tachograph malfunction provides objective evidence that something affected the vehicle's systems in ways that shouldn't be possible. When he pulled into the service station and examined his van, everything appeared normal except for one detail: a faint ozone smell lingering in the cabin, the characteristic scent of electrical discharge or ionized air. 2 days later, examining the van in better light, Ian and a coworker discovered a hand-shaped imprint burned very slightly into the fabric of the rear headrest. The outline was clear enough to be unmistakable, but the proportions were wrong. The fingers were longer and thinner than human hands. This physical evidence suggests that at some point during the encounter, possibly during the missing 8 minutes, something with heated or electrically charged skin pressed against the seat. The implications are chilling. If an entity was inside the van during those lost minutes, what occurred? What was done? What was examined or collected? The imprint introduces a disturbing element that recurs in abduction literature worldwide. Physical evidence of contact appears in locations that witnesses didn't consciously observe being touched. This suggests activities occurred during periods of missing time that left traces the witnesses only discovered later. The fact that the imprint showed non-human proportions eliminates the possibility of a human intruder and points towards something genuinely anomalous. What we're observing across these Irish encounters is a pattern of graduated contact. The phenomenon operates on a spectrum from distant observation to close interaction, and in some cases, direct physical contact. The Donegal Spheres represent observation from distance, monitoring human maritime activity. The Gormanston Descent represents closer reconnaissance, examining military installations and infrastructure. The Coahersivven Roadside Figure represents direct confrontation, blocking a vehicle and inducing missing time. The motorway stalker represents the most invasive category, pursuing a vehicle, inducing technical failures, creating missing time, and leaving physical evidence of entity presence inside the vehicle. This graduated pattern suggests intentionality and methodology. Whatever is conducting these operations in Irish airspace and on Irish soil is following protocols. They observe from distance when that suits their purposes. They move closer when they need better data. They create confrontation situations when they want to induce specific responses or collect biological samples. And they invade vehicles when they need extended access to witnesses. This isn't random. This is systematic investigation conducted with clear objectives. The question that haunts researchers is this: investigation of what? What are these entities studying? The most obvious answer is that they're studying us, human beings, our behavior, our biology, our technology, our society. The fact that encounters cluster around significant infrastructure, military bases, nuclear facilities, communication towers, suggests interest in our technological capabilities. The fact that they induce missing time and conduct examinations suggests interest in our biology. The fact that they've been conducting these operations for decades with apparent impunity suggests either superior technology that makes interception impossible, or some form of agreement or understanding with human authorities that we are not privy to. The Irish government's handling of these cases reveals a quiet pattern of documentation without public acknowledgement. Garda file reports on unusual sightings, The Air Corps investigates incidents at military facilities. The Coast Guard logs maritime anomalies. Yet there's no public database, no official investigation bureau, no government statement acknowledging the pattern. This silence doesn't mean disbelief. It means the phenomenon is being taken seriously enough to document, but not seriously enough, or perhaps too seriously, to discuss publicly. What makes the Irish cases particularly valuable to researchers is their consistency. The witnesses are ordinary people, farmers, fishermen, delivery drivers, military personnel, who had no prior interest in UFOs and gained nothing from reporting their experiences. Many face ridicule or skepticism from family and community, yet they persist in their accounts because the experiences were real, traumatic, and impossible to forget. The physical evidence, ground traces, electromagnetic effects, tachograph anomalies corroborates their testimony and transforms subjective experience into objective phenomena. As we conclude this investigation, we're left with profound questions. If these encounters represent extraterrestrial visitation, what is the agenda? Why Ireland specifically, though the phenomenon is global? What is being studied, collected, or monitored? And most unsettling, if these operations have been ongoing for decades with increasing frequency and boldness, what does that suggest about the timeline? Are we being prepared for something? Gradually acclimated to their presence? Or are we simply subjects in a long-term study that will continue indefinitely, regardless of our awareness or consent? The Irish encounters teach us that the UFO phenomenon isn't about distant lights in the sky. It's about technology that violates our physics, entities that observe us with clinical detachment, and operations that demonstrate clear purpose and methodology. It's about the reality that we share our world with something else, something that has been here longer than we'd like to admit, something that operates with capabilities we can't match and motives we can't fully understand. Ireland's fog-shrouded roads, its Atlantic coastlines, its military bases, and its ancient landscapes have become laboratories for contact, and the witnesses who emerge from these encounters carry memories that refuse to fade and questions that demand answers our civilization isn't yet equipped to provide.